Here I go again. You would think I'd be done, with what I said in my last videos. Like all these building points, the philosophical support. You would think it was a secular stance. And you'd be right. But a part of that belongs in the faith, too. A part of that does belong in the faith. Now, what's got me curious is this fetter called doubt. You have to break the fetter of doubt in order to be completely enlightened. And not just like doubt. This is a unique thing. The feather of doubt in Buddhist teachings. And does it specify which of Buddhist teachings? Like, does it mean that we have to believe everything that Buddha says? And in which case, what degree of belief? For example, Buddha meets a creator god. Could have been Brahman. More than likely, if he was going off of experience. But if he wasn't going off of experience, it could have been Brahman, Yahweh, or the demiurge. I think that some of the Gnostic interpretations came from Buddhism. And to which end? And so it's really interesting. So there's a unique compatibility with Buddhism and Christianity. I'm, by the way, not a Christian. For those of you who are, I also don't condemn you for being a Christian. Also, those of you who are secular, I don't condemn you for that either. I was secular for the longest time. I might even still be secular. The way I weave this web of wisdom is to be as crystal clear as the water on a sandy beach in Florida. Or a crystal clear pond. It is to say that how can I have a fetter of doubt if I'm not even compelled to have faith? It is not that I doubt the truth. I don't doubt what's true. I don't have the capacity to have faith. And I believe faith is also a fetter. It's also a hindrance. Some of you will shy away. There was a second sect of Buddhism made to make Buddha more divine than he actually was in the original sect. Although the original sect of Buddhism was way too much centered on self. So much that Hermeticism was rampant. the second set of Buddhism would call the first sect devils, and this first sect of Buddhism would call the second sect heresy. Although they could work together easily. Easily they work together and build off of one another. Clearly. Like, if you're on the outside looking in, you can see how somebody who prefers the second sect might walk like the first. The same follows for temples. It's unnecessary to have temples. It is beautiful, but it's unnecessary to go to temples and meditate for 4 to 8 hours a day. And in my experience, not in the matter of fact and not applied to everyone and everything, in my experience, achieving the first stage of enlightenment was easy, super easy, because I understood interconnectivity as a pantheist. I understood breaking away from the ego as an alchemist. So I already had the sense of no permanent self. Like, that is already a easy thing to comprehend. That's something that on the deepest levels of many religions is easy to comprehend. Just Buddhism, the brilliant thing about Buddhism, it's forward and upfront about it. It says you can live with the ego or you can blow up the ego, but either way it goes, you have to understand that that is not you. On the deepest level, and if at all possible, you have to understand that side of you, including this calculating mind, is not living forever. The state of awareness you have is not living forever. Awareness itself might live. Or might not. I don't know. Presence itself, which is just another term, but could very well be a more better, purposeful term. For example, the way that you perceive things and the way that you're present is different, and then it unfolds into different layers of presence. I, in my experience with everything else, tend to pick apart truths and falsehoods and mistakes. I do that. And that is just something that I've always done. I've done it with every belief system. And I've even doubted my own skepticism itself. Put it to the test to provide a clear understanding of buildable pieces to have a universal mind, perhaps. So, and this is also dismissed in Buddhism. The possibility of such is a heresy. But universal interconnectedness, not heresy. In fact, it's a necessity, and then in such ways, the modern view necessitates interconnectedness. I mean, there's no way to escape interconnectedness with space-time, the information law upon space-time, quantum information law, like from classical to quantum mechanics, you cannot separate the interconnectedness of the universe. And the mere observation of expansion provides indisputable evidence for this. Further along the lines, like, you'll find many terms and conditions of the universe, weird way to phrase it, that show that energy, gravity, dark matter, dark energy, so many things necessitate interconnectivity, time itself, and the origin of causes. But where I deviate from secular Buddhism is that I've always viewed this stuff as divine. It's inescapable in language, in definition, via language. This is divine. The impermanence within the permanence. And as we can see, there's a lot more permanence than impermanence. Impermanence is the experience of suffering. Yes, the feeling that the thing that you just ate, it faded and now you're sad. Or the relationship you lost. In the core of the universe, though, which blows and it, bear with me, it blows Buddhism wide open, but it also is a good marriage to Buddhism, is that everything is actually permanent in one form or another, including your life. A lot of people don't know the dimensionality of your life, that upon decay, if you were to keep this record, the record of your life is physically living still, even upon decay. In the appearance of time, it is physically, it is seen as though it is alive 1 billion years from now, until the universe collapses because of the law of information. This would be akin to, for example, like alternative universes, parallel universes, and multiverses. But there's also other things like there's no evidence for it, but the law of information supports the concept of the Akashic records, and that makes it living information. What is perceived as impermanence in Buddhism is actually not, and to be clear, never will be. as a matter of fact. Not as a matter of wisdom, as a matter of fact. It is only a matter of perspective that it is permanent, and it is a matter of the state of your presence that it is impermanent. In fact, the staple that is always permanent is the present, because if you were to define the past and the future to an infinitesimal point, it would have to be permanent. And so the universe is actually filled with states of time, where it's not a flow of time, but it is a state. And every new present exists upon the present of the other states. Expanding into more and more presence. We can drop quantum woo arguments for a moment. And I know they're not, but for some people, they would be. Even though some, like a lot of these theories are very, very well supported. Like, it's an understatement to call them theories. They're not colloquial theories, they're scientific theories. Most of these are serious. Mathematically proven. And we even have evidence for imaginary time, which sounds oxymoronic because of the word imaginary, but the evidence is experimental to show evidence for the quote-unquote imaginary numbers having real applicable evidence. In the world. So I took a break to come back with a different frame of mind. And I can see a divider amongst the fetters and claims within the fetters and reality beyond what people call fetters. Doubt can't be a hindrance if you don't care about doubt. A lot of these fetters aren't fetters if they are inconsequential to your being. I know this is heresy by the definition of Buddhism. However, I know that lying is a fetter. And it's not even included in the fetters. If you go on saying something that is untrue, and this is taught by Buddha as well, if you go on saying something and it is not evidentially true, or you don't believe it of your whole heart to be true, or you don't have the experience of it to be true, like these are one of the three things that make something false. If you don't care about it, it's not a hindrance to you. But the lying is a hindrance in your development. And the reason why it's a hindrance in your development is because you're going to think about the lying. I need to say this So they understand that doubt is a feather and they shouldn't have no doubt. And by saying this, they'll have no doubt. However, and this is the difference between you and Buddha, and the difference between some arhats and other arhats. See, people put these things in a box and put it into 4 stages, including Buddha. But they're not all equally wise. That is the truth. That is the truth. These people are not in a hive mind. That must be so. They don't all share the same brain. That must be so. They don't all share the same mind. That must be so. They have the same, perhaps, experience. They have the same, perhaps, awareness. They have the same, perhaps, presence. But the other things they don't. And so when you go off and you say to someone, this is why you don't doubt, the lying is not you. And so you're not being your true self, and so you are creating a hindrance not mentioned in the faith. And so how I justify defeating the fetter of doubt is by dismissing the feather of doubt altogether as unimportant to my development. This is not arrogance. This is honor. And this is wisdom. If you want to be in the video, I mean, you can be in the video because the video is still going to record. I just got like 5 or 10 minutes left. Just give me 5 or 10 minutes, please. I love you. Knowledge isn't wisdom. Everyone knows this. But knowledge is very useful. Wisdom creates knowledge. And with knowledge and other pieces of knowledge, the wise can create more knowledge. Truth, facts, understanding. So, when one says, like myself, I don't know if I'm going to be reborn, that is true because I don't have the knowledge of rebirth, and I also don't know if I'm going to be reborn. To defeat this, what people say, well, if you doubt that the Buddhist path is gonna keep you, not gonna help you not be reborn, It is a simple question. I don't know if I'm going to be reborn. I don't know where I stand on the Buddhist path. But having defeated many of the fetters, overcoming many of the fetters, I know I won't have any desire to come back. And that would be true whether I believe in rebirth or whether I disbelieve in rebirth. The Buddha's teaching was escaping the cycle of suffering. If you disbelieve in rebirth, you disbelieve the part about escaping the cycle, and you believe in the part about the suffering. I don't disbelieve in rebirth. In fact, I created a reason that one may be reborn. In one of my great truths, I said that it could be that we defeat all the fetters and we go into emptiness itself, become emptiness itself, become happiness itself, become nirvana itself, compassion itself, and all the components that build the logical universe down to consciousness, and the other components that build the material universe down to consciousness. As a matter of fact, this would be so on a quantum mechanical level for every living being. And it is that out of this nirvana, which everything is made of, the emptiness, a portion of it becomes the material verse, and a portion of it becomes the life force. And that is in simple, wise terms. This means that a portion of it becomes the material, and of the material, a portion of it, with the material perhaps, becomes the beings that evolved on this planet, and other planets, and other universes, and other planets and universes, and other realms. This level of experience where one dies, they lose all identity. So one might argue, well, that's not going with you. Whatever you is, the identifier you. And so when you become emptiness, which you have to, by the laws of physics, you have to become the quantum field, or you doesn't exist anyways. Whatever comes out of that and is born is a rebirth. The whatever components of you that comes out of that. That is a rebirth. And Buddha used the term rebirth when the term reincarnation existed. This is subtly important. Buddha also said there wasn't a permanent soul. So this is key. I'm not blaspheming. I'm not using heresy here. I'm quantifying and qualifying with my wisdom. The soul may reincarnate. But even the soul doesn't, the ego of the soul has a representation to something. And this is where the word rebirth comes from. This is what I realized in my first awakening. This is what everyone should know in their first awakening. It's a simple frame of logic. You are the ego of your awareness, presence, soul, higher self. Higher self, the subconscious, etc. You can give it all kinds of names. True self is an ego upon God, or you can skip God and say emptiness. I used both. In my first awakening, it was ego upon God. And God is the ego upon the source, is what I said before. The source is equivalent to immanence, emptiness. So the metaphysical combined with the physical give us the same answer. On a deep level, you have a sense of self, and on a deeper level, you have a sense of soul, and on a deeper level, you have a sense that it is interconnected to emptiness. It is not called a self or a soul because identifiably, until everything becomes emptiness, even though everything is technically one, made of emptiness, properly, all souls, all selves are in fact products of emptiness, and products not outside of but within. And so the source of everything and the ultimate identity of everyone is emptiness. And so that's where the rebirth comes from. Everything's coming back. Buddha's plan to end suffering was that you just stay at emptiness. That's the plan. You look at him like an architect, not a god, but like an architect in this plan. Eventually, everything's going back to emptiness anyways. But that was Buddha's plan. And he laid out a blueprint for this. And if you agreed with all the steps of the blueprint, including your doubts, because you don't want to come back and question the... See, because if you have the desire to come back and question the doubts, to challenge the doubts, now you have to come up with a whole nother plan if you want to escape the cycle. And unironically, this doesn't make it any, and this is the key interesting facts. It doesn't make it any more divine than anything else. I mean, we can say, well, there's, iron chains on earth, and then there's gold chains in the heavens, and gold chains in the formless, or platinum chains, right? But the nirvana, the emptiness, is divinity itself. But the plan itself is also isn't any more divine than these stages of life. Somebody asked, well, if you desire to be reborn, I don't have any desire to be reborn, by the way. I'm saying that whether I'm reborn is not troublesome to me. It is not a troubling thought. It doesn't bother me. I could see where one could do acts of good, could turn earth into a heavenly realm. I could see where somebody could use Buddhism or even other parts of religion and try and create some kind of functioning, maybe stoic society. In which case the majority of suffering would be defeated. I mean, in this case, you could wonder, like, in the distant future, if people wake up and say, well, obviously I can't have everything, and everything's not going to satisfy me, and find the inner happiness, as inner satisfaction, then suffering is not going to be an issue anymore, even if people desire to come back. And that's going to be an interesting hypothetical that may play out, given that they don't reincarnate, given that they literally everything but reincarnate. The other side of this token is that we just don't rebirth. And so the only point to Buddhism then is addressing the suffering and the fetters of suffering. In which case, indefinitely, even when found to be false, the fetter of doubt would be there, which would falsify the fetter of doubt completely. I mean, then the fetter of doubt only has one function. You understand? The fetter of doubt has literally one function. That is doubting whether you can be liberated. at all. And I know what that fetter is because I liberated myself from that fetter. And the way I did it was I completely forgot it was there in the midst of my enlightenment. In the midst of my walking meditation, and one word came to me, and it was compassion, which sums up the entire plan, by the way. It sums up the near almost all the solutions to suffering at all. Two things that must be inseparable for suffering to be released is compassion and liberation. And compassion liberated me. Compassion did the liberation for me. Compassion for myself liberated me. Because one might say, how does one act without desire? Until you realize what the hell craving is. And I realized this as somebody who still has cravings for nicotine. What is craving? And as somebody who vapes, I don't vape at work. I go the whole day without vaping sometimes. I really do. And I'm not going to buy another vape. I just pick one up that my girlfriend has, and I hit it every now and then when I'm home. And it's not because of the craving at that point, it's just because it's there. Much like a cake that I have at the house. I don't eat cake every day. And I don't eat cake all the time. But I realized a really huge component, a biological component in craving. From my knowledge. And this explains a lot. There are people out there who are teachers, and they will say, first and foremost, quit smoking. Right? And they're dedicated teachers. Right. They don't ever tell the diabetic people or just fat people in general to slow down on what you eat. And somebody's going to say, it's not the same. Unfortunately for you, it is actually the same. It's exactly the same as smoking, because let me tell you, or vaping, something that's not going to give you cancer, fine, or vaping. Why is it the same? Because it turns out that nicotine is in almost all your food ingredients at low levels. So when you overconsume, you're addicted to the nicotine in the food. You crave the food because it has nicotine in it. Some of you didn't know that. Some people are fat who are eating foods and they're not addicted to the sugars. They might have low sugar foods, but they just overconsume to satisfy a nicotine craving. A very subtle craving. That they wouldn't have recognized had they not known. And I bet they wish they wouldn't have known. Jainism understood this. Jainism was wrong in retrospect because they almost all starved to death. And that's what Buddha saw. It's like, well, starving to death isn't going to save us. But yes, in your rice, yes, in your chicken, yes, in your beef, yes, in your fish. No matter where you go, tomatoes. In fact, tomatoes are worse because tomatoes feed bad microbes that send signals to the brain. And so what the hell is liberation if you still have craving? Right? Because that's biologically fact. That's beyond the functions of the like, somebody's thinking probably to themselves, well, how Buddha did it was his brain rewired itself. I'm sorry to tell you this, but there are functions beyond the brain in the body that delegate craving. And you're not rewiring those. You're subduing those. And so what it means to be liberated from your craving is that you're not suffering as a result of your craving. What it means is you're not sad because you don't have a fucking piece of cake. You're not sad because you don't have a cigarette. You're not going around asking people for cigarettes to satisfy you, because all it's going to bring you is an ounce of bliss. What it means is that you can live your life despite craving. This is detachment. This is liberation. And when you quit something unhealthy for you, you're even liberated further. For example, caffeine sharpens the mind, but if you drink too much caffeine, it's bad for the brain. You become caffeine dependent. You can use the energy to maybe focus more, or your mind might just go thought after thought after thought, which ruins your meditation, instead of having good thoughts. I'll give a pristine example of the issue that I'm facing that people don't understand. The metaphor, for those of you who are Christian and Buddhist, the metaphor for the Garden of Eden, and no, the world wasn't created in 6 days, 6,000 years ago. It was not. But there's a metaphor there that you're missing if you're a creationist. The literal living metaphor is that the tree of knowledge and of good and evil literally does bring you wisdom. If you were to eat of the metaphorical tree, and eating, I don't mean literally eating, I mean consuming in your mind, so that you would see like the gods, is what the serpent said, right? Where in the list, in the scripture, did it say that because first of all, it goes also back to this is also a Sumerian, this isn't just a biblical story, this is also a Sumerian story, so this is a whole story, if you were to unpack it outside the Bible, nowhere in the Bible does it say the serpent was a liar or a deceiver. Well, it may have said in such a way, he is a tempter. But he did not lie about the tree. The serpent said, "You shall not surely die." Whereas God said in that text, "You will surely die." And where do we put the onus on who's to die? Like, who died? Surely, in impedance, did he mean immediately, or did he mean 900 years later, which is the claim? Did he mean that they would never have the tree of life, which means they will live forever, just to know good and evil? And some would say, well, out of disobedience, but how can ignorant children, which is Adam and Eve, know that it is wrong to eat of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, if within the metaphor they can't know? They literally can't know. This is the sin of ignorance. Hold on. There's also another metaphor, the sin of ignorance, but the ice I'm trying to break here is while the serpent was punished. The serpent was punished because of the disobedience of two other people who benefited from eating of the tree of knowledge and good and evil, whose eyes were opened, because it says, and their eyes were opened. Like word for word it says. Now, if the serpent was going to say, like, I mean, you weren't going to live forever, I'm sure that that's not what he meant. Or she, I don't know. But the metaphor is sometimes you do have to challenge these things to get the thing that you need, including God. And for some of you who disbelieve me and say, well, no, that can't be it. Literally, one of the main characters in the Genesis wrestles with God and is named after wrestling with God. He's named what? Israel. Jacob wrestles with God, then later he's named Israel. Sometimes you do have to challenge God, because it's good for you. That is the metaphor there. He won the wrestling match. That's why he was named Israel. God had to use supernatural power to pump out a joint in order to win. Even then, when he popped out his joint, he was still like holding him. And God was under like some kind of promise. I'm not saying I believe these stories. I'm just pointing out the metaphor. Like, the Bible is literally giving you subliminal messages to challenge the thing that it is teaching. And similarly, you can't say it's not. It's got heavens and hells. It's got a creator God. Like, it's basically Christianity warped into a different way. I mean, it's less specific, so you can be, more precise about your judgments, I suppose. I don't judge. I think judgment is walking away from enlightenment, but when you paint Buddhism in the same stroke on the Asian side, Asian, I mean Indian. India is Asia. From the Eastern stroke, it's painted very similarly to how the Middle East paint heaven and hells and a creator God. And there's also a tempter. Just so happens to be a tempter also in Buddhism. This is from other religions too. Like they inherited this from Jainism and Hinduism. This is this other stuff, which is painted similarly. It's kind of wild. Hinduism is kind of wild because it starts with, well, there's technically only one God that takes multiple forms, and that's Brahman. And then later on, they said, well, there's technically only one God that takes multiple forms, and that's Krishna. And that's actually a religion of its own, but it came out of Hinduism, and it's almost like Hinduism. And Krishna seems like a Buddhist. Like Krishna is a Buddha. Just a really awesome teacher. Really compassionate. It seems like Krishna adopted Buddhist teachings, became a Buddha, and people did what they did to Buddha with Krishna and just made him a god instead of trying to be compassionate. This happened also with Jesus. These archetypes, I'm not saying they're not real people, happen over and over where somebody is super enlightened, somebody is super compassionate, somebody says, why don't we all be compassionate? And they take that being, that person, they make a stone statue, gold statue, a symbol, cross, something. And they say this symbolizes the thing that they meant, instead of what they actually meant. And like this didn't stop at Jesus Christ. Like it kept on going afterwards. There was other religions that came out afterwards. I got snuffed out. Zoroastrianism. This happened again in Zoroastrianism. Briefly before Christianity, in Zoroastrianism, where they lived side by side with Judaism, with the Hebrews. The Hebrews stole some ideas from Zoroastrianism before the Zoroastrianisms all but got snuffed out. The Zoroastrians had also heaven and hell, and the Zoroastrians traded ideas probably with the Buddhists. Because this was around 600 BC, don't you know? This was around 500 BC, don't you know? All these religions around the same time trading ideas. Like from east to west. Constantly. You know? And the dream about the metaphor for the temple. There's a metaphor to the temple, the Jewish temple, where the west is walled off. There is a metaphor for that. And it is still apparent to today. You could say it's for secularism, but they couldn't have known about that. It could have been because after the temple, there was going to be really no new spiritual ideas. And then boom, what happened? We had alchemy come out of thin air in the early 1500s. A new faithful idea that had you go on a journey to merge your broken pieces to find your true self. It is hard work that you had to do on your own, and it's the only thing that came out of the West that resembles what came out of Buddhism. You had to do hard work on your own to be a good person, to be your true self, to get out of the cycle of filth. And I don't think we should call it filth. And so, from a scholarly perspective, I have my doubts. But from my personal perspective, I don't care about my doubts. My doubts don't bother me, they're not a hindrance. And so I defeat the fetter of doubt by practicing knowing that every feather I take away is 1 inch away from suffering. And another suffering that may go on in Buddhism, another unnecessary suffering that goes on in Buddhism, is while people go and do these and practice Buddhism, they get so wrapped up in Buddhism that they create other hindrances and fetters for themselves within the practice. You know, they create hindrances and fetters for others, perhaps, too. One might say, out of practice or experience, you need to go meditate for 3 years in order to get rid of all your fetters, and that also means becoming a hermit. That's when you'll truly get rid of all your fetters, when you become a hermit. And one might say, you need to do it with your friends. You need to do this at temple with your friends for years as a monk. And I can tell you the fetters that I'm holding on to. I still have some fetters. I'll tell you one fetter, but I'll tell you that after I'm done. One might say love is a fetter itself. And it says that in the Dharma Papa. Love is a fetter. I have so much compassion for, this is what I've heard, word for word, or almost. I have so much compassion for people raising children and having a family. But love is a fetter. You just turned off almost all the people in the relationship, except for the very uniquely wise from Buddhism in one phrase. And is it truthful and beneficial? One, is it truthful? You say from Scripture, but Scripture alone is not true. So, to condense this down, you can have a relationship and You can have love and compassion. The key is that going to get in the way of your enlightenment? And you can have those things out of the way of your enlightenment, just as any enlightened person can enjoy a cake or a rice cake or rice with seasoning. They can love these things, but be detached from the cravings. The cravings of love are different than the love itself.